The throne room of an empire 200 years old, marble that has held the weight of conquerors, banners from every house in the 17 systems hanging from the ceiling like the breath of dead kings. And down the long aisle, a man walks, brown hair that needs a comb, plain face, plain clothes, plain everything. Earth's offering to end 50 years of war. Tighter now, the empress on her dais, her jaw set, 2 centuries of rule behind her eyes, and tonight she is being insulted. She knows it. The galaxy knows it. The nobles in the hall are already smiling behind their hands. Closer, the man's small smile, like he is meeting an old friend. He should be afraid. He is not afraid. He is just walking. And somewhere in the wedding hall, an empress's hand begins to tremble for the first time in 80 years, because she has seen something in his face, something that does not belong on a farmer. And the galaxy is about to learn what it sent her. Part 1. The Man They Sent. The Grand Hall of Unity smelled like crushed silver flowers in waiting. Empress Leora Vayan stood at the head of the dais. 200 years she had ruled. 3 wars she had bled through. 17 star systems answered when she breathed. And tonight she was getting married to end a 50-year war with Earth. She had expected a hero. She had expected a soldier with a chest full of medals, or a famous scientist, or a statesman who could shape a sentence into a sword. Someone Earth could be proud to offer. Someone the galaxy would whisper about for decades. She did not expect what walked through the doors. He was small, not small the way the children of the lower courts were small, just ordinary. A human man in his 30s, brown hair that needed a comb, plain face, plain clothes, plain everything. Walking toward her down a marble aisle that had carried generals and conquerors for 900 years. He smiled when he saw her, a small smile, gentle, like he was meeting an old friend. Lyora's jaw tightened, because the smile was wrong, because a man should not smile that way at an empress he had never met, because a man being married to a woman who could level his home planet from her bedroom should be afraid. He was not afraid. He was just walking. The whispers started before he reached the 3rd step. That's him. Surely there's been a mistake. An agricultural specialist. They sent us a farmer. Lyora kept her face still. She had worn that face across 2 centuries. It did not crack now. But underneath the marble of her expression, something hot and bitter coiled in her chest. Insult. That was the word. This was an insult. Her advisors had warned her. Earth had been losing the war for the last 8 years. They needed the marriage more than the Alarian Dominion did. They should have sent their best, their brightest, their most decorated. Instead, they had scraped up a man who grew tomatoes for colony worlds. The galaxy was watching, and the galaxy was going to laugh. He reached the dais. He stopped at the proper distance. He bowed, not too low, not too shallow. Exactly the depth a diplomat from a neutral province would have managed after 6 weeks of coaching. Empress Vayan, he said. His voice was lower than she had expected. Warmer, like cooling stone after sunset. She gave him the bonding words in Old Ilarian. The ceremony required them. The galaxy required them. Her dignity required them. She spoke them clearly, slowly, the way one spoke to a child who might mispronounce a sacred phrase and turn a wedding into an embarrassment that would be played on news loops for a year. He answered, in Ilarian. Perfect Ilarian. Better Ilarian than half the southern provinces. Her left eyebrow moved, half a centimeter. The smallest reaction she had given in public in 80 years. The council scribe, a man who had recorded her every breath since her 100th birthday, made a tiny mark in his ledger and stared. Cale Hadley repeated the bonding words without a single stumble. He should have stumbled. The bonding words were designed to be impossible. 12 syllables. Glottal stops that bent human tongues into knots. Pitch shifts that required tonal training. 3 months minimum, the linguist said. 6 months for fluency. A year before the words felt natural in a foreign mouth. He spoke them like he had grown up saying them. The whispers stopped. For 3 heartbeats, the Grand Hall of Unity was completely silent. Then High Counselor Eivor Vale, Master of Ceremonies, raised the binding cord. He spoke the closing words. He looped the silver braid around Leora's left wrist and Kale's right wrist and pulled it tight. It was done. She was married. To a man who grew tomatoes, who somehow spoke her language better than the diplomats Earth had sent to negotiate the war. She looked at him. He smiled, that same gentle smile. He said in Alarian, "Thank you for being patient with me." Patient with him. She wanted to laugh. She did not. She let him take her hand and walk her down the aisle through the watching nobles, and she kept her face still. And inside her chest, something small and curious was waking up after a very long sleep. The feast hall held 3,000. It was full. Every house, every province, every general she trusted, and every cousin she did not. The Cassiel banners hung from the eastern wall, the Tarn banners from the west, and down the long table where Leora and Kale sat side by side, 100 faces watched them with the specific patience of predators, waiting to see if the wounded thing they had been promised would actually bleed. Kale ate slowly. He used the right utensils. He drank from the correct cup. He did not stare. He did not try to fill the silence with chatter. He did not, as far as Leora could tell, do anything wrong at all. Which was the problem? Because someone who had been briefed for 6 weeks would still be making mistakes. Forks, cups, bow depth, pronouns when addressing nobility. There were 40 rules of Illyrian table etiquette, and most diplomats broke 9 of them at any given dinner. He had broken none. He was watching the room. He was not staring. He was watching. His eyes moved when he reached for his glass. They moved when he set it down. They moved when he turned his head to listen to her. She counted. He looked at the eastern entrance 4 times in the first 10 minutes. The western entrance 3 times. The balcony above the orchestra twice. He had memorized the exit points. He was tracking the guards. He was tracking the servers. He was tracking everyone. A farmer would not do that. A farmer would be staring at the chandelier. The first cousin came up at the 7th course. Lord Tessar Mael, Leora's least favorite relative on a list that ran 400 names long. Tessar was tall. Tessar was handsome in the cold way of houses that bred for jawlines. Tessar had once tried to challenge Leora's youngest sister to a duel over a comment about his hairline. He had a voice like polished ice. He stopped in front of Kale and tilted his head. "So," he said in Aelarian slow enough that a human child could follow, "you are a farmer." Kale looked up. "Yes. You grow things in dirt." "Mostly, yes." "Charming." Tessar smiled, the smile of a man peeling skin off a fruit. "And tell me, husband of the Empress, what battles have you fought? What enemies have you defeated? What armies have trembled at the sound of your name?" "None. None. I am not a soldier, Lord Mael. I am good with plants." The hall heard it. The hall had been listening for it. The hall laughed. Not all at once. Not loudly. Just enough. A wave of soft, polite, devastating laughter that ran from the high tables to the low and back again. Leora's face stayed still. Her throat closed. She was an empress. She had ruled for 200 years. She had crushed 2 rebellions and survived an assassination attempt that killed 9 of her guards. And tonight her people were laughing at the man she had been forced to marry, and she could feel her advisor's eyes on the side of her face, and she could feel the heat climbing up her neck under the high collar of her ceremonial robes. She was being humiliated in her own hall, beside the husband Earth had sent to humiliate her. She turned to look at Kale, expecting to see embarrassment. Pink cheeks, a swallowed throat. The shame of a small man who had just been laughed at by 3,000 of the most powerful people in the galaxy. He was not embarrassed. He was watching Tessar. For half a second. Less. The space of a breath. The warmth was gone from his face. The gentleness was gone. What looked out at her cousin was something cold and flat and patient. Something that did not blink. Something that had measured Tessar's neck and weighed his collarbone and decided exactly where the knife would go in. Then the warmth came back. Kale smiled at Tessar. "I am sorry to disappoint my lord," he said. "Perhaps tomorrow I could show you the gardens. They have been neglected. I think they could be beautiful again." Tessar laughed. The hall laughed with him. They moved on. Leora sat very still. She had seen it. She had been the only one looking at the right place at the right moment, and she had seen it. The half second when the farmer was not a farmer, when the kind brown eyes had looked at her cousin the way her oldest generals looked at maps of cities they were about to burn. She turned slowly back to her plate. She picked up her cup. She did not drink, because her hand was not quite steady. And her hand had not been not quite steady for any reason at all in a very long time. That night in the Empress's private chambers, Kale unpacked his bag. It was a small bag, a single soft case the size of a child's shoulder pack. He had carried it himself from the transport. He had refused the servants who tried to take it. Leora watched him. He set out a folded shirt, a small wooden box with a hinge, a reading slate, a leather pouch she could not see into, a worn pocket knife with a handle wrapped in dark cord, 3 seed packets, that was all. A man marrying an empress, with a bag the size of a child's pack, containing 3 seed packets and a pocket knife. "Is that all?" she said. "Yes." "Earth sent you with that." "I asked for that." "You asked to come to a court of 9,000, with a bag the size of my hand. Most things you need you don't pack." He said it lightly, the way he said everything, but his hands were doing something while he said it, folding the soft case, tucking it under the cabinet, sliding the pocket knife between his belt and the lining of his trousers in a motion so smooth she only saw it because she was looking for it. "You move like a hunter," she said. He turned. For a second, he just looked at her. "I grew up on Kepler 442b," he said. "It was a dangerous place. Lots of predators. You learn to walk light." "Predators?" "Big ones. And the way you watch every room before you enter it. Old habit. And the scars on your forearms." He looked down at his arms. The cuffs of his shirt had ridden up an inch above his wrists. Thin white lines crossed his skin in patterns she had seen before. 80 years before, in a different room, on a different planet, on the arms of a knife master from the Hesperian fighting schools. "I was a clumsy boy," he said. "You were a clumsy boy. I got better. You got better." He did not smile. He did not look away. He just stood there in her private chamber with 3 seed packets on the table beside him, and he met her eyes and he waited. She let it go. She let it go because she wanted to see what came next. She let it go because for the first time in 80 years, she was not bored. The first 3 weeks were quiet. Kale moved into the south wing. He did not ask for the Empress's chambers. He did not, as the diplomats had clumsily implied during the marriage negotiations, expect the privileges of a husband. He took a small set of rooms 2 corridors from her own. He went to bed early. He woke before the sun. He started in the gardens. The palace gardens had been neglected for decades. The royal gardener had died 7 years ago. Lyora had not replaced him. The hedges had grown wild. The fountains had clogged. The flower beds had been swallowed by climbing vines that no one knew the names of anymore. Kale walked the gardens for 2 full days before he touched anything. He walked. He looked. He squatted down beside plants and rubbed leaves between his fingers and smelled the dirt. He did not take notes. He did not bring servants. He just walked. On the 3rd day, he asked the head steward for tools. The head steward, a 1,000-year-old Alarian named Vorin, who had served 3 empresses, came to Leora's study personally. "He wants a spade," Vorin said. "A spade. And a pair of shears. He said he would replace them if he broke them." "Give him the spade, Vorin." "Empress, the gardens have not been. Give him the spade." Vorin bowed and went. Lyora went to the eastern balcony. She watched. Kale knelt in the dirt of the largest flower bed. He had taken off the diplomat's jacket Earth had sent him in. He was wearing a plain shirt. The sleeves were rolled up past his elbows. She could see the white scars from this distance. She could see the muscles in his forearms when he gripped the spade. A farmer's arms. A soldier's scars. He worked. He worked the way a man works when he is not waiting for someone to relieve him. He worked the way a man works when the work is the point. He turned soil. He pulled weeds. He laid them in a pile for compost. He did not stop. He did not stretch. He did not look up at the windows of the palace to see who might be watching. She watched for an hour. Then she went back inside. She did not know why she had watched for an hour. She did not want to think about it. By the end of the third week, he knew the staff, not just by face, by name, by age, by province, by the names of their children, by the foods they were allergic to, by which of them had bad knees and which of them had a husband who drank. Leora noticed because of Sarah. Sarah was a kitchen girl. 16 Ilarian years, which was about 12 human ones. Small, shy, had been hired 3 months before the wedding because her mother needed the wages. Leora had never spoken to her. One morning, Leora passed through the lower corridor on her way to the war room. Sarah was carrying a tray. The tray was too heavy. Sarah was about to drop it. Cale appeared from a doorway and took the tray. He did not lecture her about carrying too much. He did not call for another servant. He took the tray. He set it on a side table. He looked at her and said in perfect Ilarian, "Your mother's knee, is she better?" Sarah nodded. Her eyes were big. She said, "Yes, sir, the salve worked. Thank you for asking." "Good." "Sir," she said, "Cook says the tomatoes from your garden. He says they taste like sunlight." Cale smiled. "Tell Cook he is being kind." "He is not being kind, sir. He is being honest." She picked up the tray lighter now because Cale had helped her balance it, and she walked away. Leora stood at the corner of the corridor where neither of them could see her. She watched Cale watch the girl walk away. She watched his face soften. She watched the small smile. And then she watched the smile fade. She watched his eyes flick to the corridor's far doorway. The window above the doorway, the lock on the third door, the angle of light from the upper sconce, the exit 2 corridors down, all in under a second. A man does not check exits when he is alone in a hallway, unless he is always checking exits. She walked into the war room and did not hear a word of the security briefing that followed. By the second month, he spoke Ilarian like a native. By the second month, half the kitchen staff loved him. By the second month, the head of palace security, a hard old colonel named Brenner Voss, who had not laughed in front of anyone in 40 years, was caught smiling at something Cale had said about the way Ilarian command structures handled overlapping shifts. By the second month, Leora was eating dinner with him in the gardens 4 nights a week. She told herself it was diplomacy. She told herself the galaxy needed to see the Empress sharing meals with her human husband. She told herself 1,000 small lies. She also began to listen. He talked about Kepler 442b, the colony where he had been born. He talked about the predators that came down from the northern ridge at night, about the way the storms tasted like metal, about a sister who had drowned in a flood when he was 9, about his parents who had died fighting a corporate occupation when he was 12. He told her he had been raised by an aunt after that. He told her he had studied agriculture at a small university. He told her he had worked for the Colonial Development Office for 15 years before being assigned to this marriage. He told her his favorite color was the green of new spring leaves. She believed half of it. She believed all of it. She did not know which. In the third month, the vase fell. She was walking with him in the upper courtyard. It was a clear morning. The sun was thin and gold. She had been telling him about a song her grandmother used to sing, which she had not told anyone in 140 years, and she did not know why she had told him. She heard a sound above them. Stone. Scraping. She had time to register that the sound was wrong. She did not have time to do anything about it. Cale's arm hit her across the chest. Not hard, just exactly hard enough. She stumbled 2 steps to her left, and her ceremonial cape twisted around her ankles, and she almost fell. The vase hit the courtyard stones where she had been standing. It was a large vase, black marble, older than her grandmother. It exploded on the stones with a sound like a small bomb, and shards flew in a wide arc, and one of them buried itself in the wall beside Leora's hip point, first deep. Silence. Then the running, the guards, the shouting from the upper balconies, the flurry of inspection. Leora stood very still. Cale stood beside her. He was already scanning the upper balcony. His hand had moved to his hip and stopped halfway. His weight had shifted onto the balls of his feet. His breathing had not changed at all. A guard arrived, then a captain, then the head of security. "Empress, are you—" "I am fine." "How?" "My husband moved me." The captain turned to Cale. "Sir, that was—" "Lucky," Cale said. He smiled, a small, tired, slightly embarrassed smile. Old reflex. I had a cousin who used to throw things at me when we were kids. I jump when things move above me. The captain laughed. The guards laughed. The crisis became a funny story. The Empress had been saved by a farmer's twitchy reflexes from a falling vase that the inspectors would later determine had been improperly anchored, the result of a maintenance lapse during the wedding preparations. A tragic accident narrowly averted, thanks be to the gods. Lyora did not laugh. Kale looked at her. He saw that she was not laughing. A small acknowledgement crossed his face. Not panic, just a nod of one professional to another. The look of a man who knows he has been seen. Then it was gone, and he was the farmer again, scratching the back of his head and apologizing to the captain for the dramatic shove. That night in her private chamber, she said, "Tell me about your cousin." "My cousin, the one who threw things." He was quiet for a moment. "I didn't have a cousin who threw things, Leora." "I know." He looked at her. "I know," she said again. He waited. She waited. The fire crackled in the corner. The window was open a finger's width, and a thin, cold wind came in and stirred the curtain. "I move," he said carefully, "the way I do, because the place I grew up was not safe. Some habits stay with you." "That is not an answer. It is the only answer I can give you." "Why?" "Because some answers, Empress, would be dangerous to both of us if I said them out loud in this room, with this many ears in the walls." She stared at him. She had ruled for 2 centuries. She knew when she was being told the truth and when she was being told a careful, polished, deliberate piece of a truth. He was giving her a piece. He was telling her there was more. He was telling her that he knew there were listeners in her walls, which she had never told him, which only 6 people in the palace knew. "Good night, Empress," he said. "Good night, Kale." He went to his own rooms. She did not sleep. She gave the order the next morning. Her chief of intelligence, a thin woman named Hallis Kaur, whose entire career had been spent unmaking lies for a living, took the order and went away without asking why. Hallis returned 6 days later. She came at sunrise. She had a sealed slate in her hand. She bowed and waited until Leora dismissed the morning attendants and closed the door. "Tell me," Leora said. "Empress, the file Earth sent on Kale Hadley is perfect." "Perfect how?" "It is internally consistent. It is documented. It contains school records, employment history, 3 separate medical exams, family photographs, vehicle registrations, 15 years of tax filings, and a small archive of personal correspondence with an aunt named Helen who lives on Kepler 442b. And it is too perfect, Empress." Leora waited. In 15 years of working as an agricultural specialist on 12 different colony worlds, Kale Hadley produced no enemies, no conflicts, no complaints, no grievances, no incidents. He did not break a leg. He did not get a parking citation. He did not have a romantic relationship that left any trace in any record I can access. He did not change his bank in 15 years. He did not move apartments. He had one library card, and he renewed it every 3 years on the same day. Hallis. He is a ghost wearing a man's clothes, Empress. The records are not forged. I would have found that. They are. Constructed, built. The way you build a wall brick by brick, with every brick exactly the same color, and then you stand back and you realize that no wall in the real world has bricks that match that perfectly. What does that mean? It means his real life is hidden somewhere I cannot reach. And whoever hid it is very good. Better than my office. Better than I have ever seen in 22 years of doing this work. Leora set the slate down on the desk. She placed her hands flat on either side of it. She stared at the wood between her thumbs. "Earth sent us a spy," she said. "Empress, I do not have enough evidence to make that claim." "Earth sent us a spy." "Ortishas," Hallis said carefully. "Earth sent us a man whose real life is so dangerous that protecting his cover was more important than the marriage itself." Leora looked up. "Explain." "If he were a spy in the simple sense, his cover would be looser. The records would have small flaws. A spy wants to look real, and real is messy. His records do not look real. They look protected, like someone built a vault around him and welded it shut. You think they are hiding him from us? Or hiding him from someone else? Who? I do not know, Empress. Leora was quiet for a long time. Then she said, continue investigating. Quietly. Do not let him know you are looking. If he learns we are watching him, I want it to be because I told him myself. Yes, Empress. Hallis bowed and left. Leora stood at her window and watched her husband in the gardens below. He was kneeling in the dirt of the new bed he had cleared. He was planting something. His hands moved with patience. He stopped to wipe his forehead. He looked up at the sky and she stepped back from the window, and her heart was doing something stupid and complicated in her chest that had nothing to do with intelligence reports. 5 days later, in the dead hour after midnight, the long-range communicator in her private receiving room activated without her permission. She had been reading by the fire. She had been wearing a night robe and a pair of soft shoes that her sister had given her 2 centuries ago. She had not been expecting a call. She had especially not been expecting a hologram of her cousin to flicker into existence in the middle of her receiving room. Bypassing every security protocol. Bypassing every routing filter. Bypassing the protections that were supposed to make it impossible to reach her private chambers without her active acceptance. High Admiral Saren Vale, Cousin Saren. The cousin who 104 years ago had tried to convince the Council of Houses that Leora was unfit to rule because she had ended a war with the Scythian conquered by negotiating instead of by destroying their homeworld. Saren, who believed empires were built by warriors. Saren, who believed peace was the language of cowards. Saren, who had sworn in front of her on the day she ascended the throne that he would never bend his knee to a diplomat queen. He was smiling now. His hologram was sharp and clear and life-sized. He stood in the middle of her receiving room as if he were really there. He wore his black and silver fleet uniform. He had grown a beard. The beard had streaks of gray in it. Saren had always been vain. The gray was deliberate. He thought it made him look like a general from the old paintings. Cousin, he said. His voice. That voice. The voice that used to read her stories when she was small, and they had both been children together in the summer palace, before he had grown into a man who counted ships and resented thrones. Saren. Forgive the intrusion. I know the hour is unusual. How did you bypass my channel filters? A small favor from an old friend in the communications corps. Don't be cross with him. I told him it was urgent. Is it? I am bringing the fleet home, Leora. She kept her face still. Which fleet? Mine. All of it. 64 vessels of the 3rd Border Command. I have been on the frontier for 9 years, cousin. 9 years. It is time to come home. You were ordered to remain at the Tellurian Drift until further notice. Leora. He spread his hands, smiling. It is your wedding. The Empress has taken a husband. The Dominion celebrates. How could I, the Empress's own cousin, the head of her largest active fleet, fail to come home and offer my congratulations in person? She did not breathe for 2 seconds. The Tellurian Drift was 11 jumps away. 64 ships could not move that distance without being seen on 100 sensor stations, which meant her sensor stations had not seen them, which meant Saren had brought his fleet inside her sensor network without anyone telling her, which meant he had people inside her sensor network. How kind of you, she said. I will arrive in 3 weeks, perhaps 4. I would not want to interrupt the honeymoon. You will arrive when I tell you you may arrive. Cousin. His smile faded, his eyes did not. I am coming home for the celebration of your wedding. To this. Human. I am sure the Empress would not want to deny a member of her own house the chance to honor such a sacred event. He said sacred the way another man might have said disease. Saren. 3 weeks, cousin. 4 at the outside. Tell your husband I look forward to meeting him. The hologram folded itself out of existence. Leora stood very still in the middle of her receiving room. The fire crackled. The thin, cold wind came in through the open window. She could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. He was coming. With his fleet. For her. The marriage to Earth had been the line he had warned her not to cross. He had told her in the council chamber 18 months ago that any treaty with humanity would be the end of the Dominion. He had told her she was too soft. He had told her she was a diplomat where the throne needed a warrior. She had told him to sit down. He had sat down. He had been planning this ever since. She turned to go to the war room and ring the inner alarm and call her generals, and she stopped. Because the door to her receiving room was open. Because she had not opened it. Because Kale was standing in the doorway. He was wearing his sleep clothes, a plain shirt, plain pants. He was barefoot. He was not surprised to see the empty space where a hologram had just been. He had heard. He had been there, somewhere, standing, listening, for some part of the call. He looked at her. His expression was not the farmer's expression. It was the one she had seen for half a second across the wedding feast when Lord Tissar Mael had laughed at him. Cold, patient, calculating. Kale. How many ships? 64. And the timeline. 3 weeks. He said 3 weeks. He is lying. How do you know? Because if he were 3 weeks out, you would have seen him on your outer sensors yesterday. He is closer than that. He is much closer than that. She stared at him. Kale, how well do you trust the head of your sensor command? He has served me for 80 years. Does he have grandchildren? What? Does he have grandchildren, Leora? Where do they live? Who has access to them? She opened her mouth. She closed it. She did not have the answer. Kale walked into the receiving room. He walked past her to the small writing desk by the window. He opened the lower drawer. He took out a sheet of the heavy diplomatic paper she used for sealed correspondence. He took the ink pen from the holder. He wrote 3 words on the paper, 2 short ones, 1 longer. He held the paper up so she could see. She read it. It said Shadow Garden. Active. She did not know what it meant. He walked to the fire. He held the paper in the flames. It curled, it blackened, it folded in on itself like a dying flower. Before the last corner caught, she saw the ink one more time. The 2 words, the handwriting, the way the letters were spaced. Then it was ash. He turned back to her. He folded his hands in front of him. He waited. She found her voice. Kale. Yes. What is Shadow Garden? That Empress. He looked at her with eyes she did not know. Is a conversation we are going to have, but not in this room, not tonight, not until I know which of your walls are listening. My walls. Your walls, Leora. Half of them are listening to your cousin. He bowed, a small, careful bow. He left the room. He closed the door softly behind him. She stood by the fire. The ash of the burned paper sat on the grate. Beyond the window, the night sky over the capital was full of stars. 11 jumps away, 64 warships were moving toward her capital under a name she could not see. Inside her own walls, her husband had just told her she was not safe, and she believed him. She did not know who he was. She did not know what he could do. She did not know if the man Earth had sent her was a savior or a different kind of weapon altogether. She knew only this. For the first time in her long reign, the Empress of the Alarian Dominion was afraid. And for the first time in her long reign, she was not alone in being afraid. Somewhere 2 corridors away, a man who grew tomatoes was sitting on the edge of his bed, his hands resting flat on his knees, his breathing slow and even, waiting for the sun to rise on a day he had been preparing for since the moment he had walked into her throne room and bowed. The wedding was over. The war had just begun. Part 2, The Man Beneath the Mask. She did not sleep. She lay on her back in the high bed her grandmother had carved for her 2 centuries ago, and she stared at the ceiling, and she counted the cracks in the painted stars above her, and she did not sleep. Shadow Garden. What was Shadow Garden? It was a code phrase. Of course it was a code phrase. 2 words burned in a fire in her own receiving room by a man wearing sleep clothes who had moved through her walls without her hearing him. She had a husband who burned code phrases in her fireplace. She had a husband who had told her in her own home that her walls were listening to her cousin. She had a husband she had been told would be a farmer. She got out of bed at the 3rd hour before sunrise. She put on a plain robe. She did not call her attendants. She walked to the eastern balcony of her chambers and stood in the cold air and looked down at the gardens. He was already there. Of course he was already there. He was standing in the middle of the new bed he had cleared. He was not working. He was just standing. His arms at his sides, his head slightly tilted, looking at the eastern sky where the first thin gray of dawn was bleeding into the dark. She watched him for a long time. He did not move. The garden was quiet. The capital was quiet. The whole world was quiet except for her breathing and the distant hum of the night watch crossing the upper terrace. Then he turned his head, just his head. He looked up at her balcony. He had known she was there. He had known the whole time. He raised one hand, a small wave, half a greeting, half an apology. She did not wave back. She turned and went inside, and she rang the chime for her morning attendance, and she began the day. She called him to the garden after breakfast. Not the upper courtyard, not her receiving room, not any chamber she suspected of being listened to. The garden, the open garden, with the wind. Because wind made it harder to record voices, and Halley's had told her years ago that wind was the cheapest counter-surveillance in the galaxy. He came when she sent for him. He was wearing his work clothes, dirt under his nails, sleeves rolled up. He had been working since dawn. He looked like a man who had not slept either, but he held it differently than she did. Like a man who was used to not sleeping. She walked. He walked beside her. They did not speak for the first 3 minutes. Then she said, "Who are you?" He did not answer immediately. He walked. He looked at the path. He looked at the hedges. He looked at the sky. He was checking the air. He was checking for ears. Then he said, "My name is Cale Hadley." That part is true. What else is true? I was born on Kepler 442b. What else? My parents died when I was 12. How? Corporate occupation. The company that owned our colony decided the colonists were too expensive to keep happy. My parents were part of the resistance. They were executed in the colony square. There were 34 of them. My mother, my father, 32 others. I was made to watch. She stopped walking. He kept walking. 2 steps. Then he stopped too. He did not turn around. You were 12. Yes. They made you watch. They wanted the children to remember, to make a point, to teach the next generation what happened to families that did not cooperate. What did the next generation do? The next generation grew up. He said it quietly. She walked up to him. She stood beside him. The wind moved his hair. She could see in the morning light the lines at the corners of his eyes that she had not seen before. He was 36. He looked for 1 second 60. Cale. I was raised by an aunt for 2 years. She did her best. I was not an easy child. Then what? Then I left. I was 16. I joined something. Joined what? Something. The kind of thing you join when you are 16 and you have a list of names you remember from a colony square. She did not ask which something. She did not ask the list. She did not need to. She had been a young woman once a long time ago, and she had also had a list of names, and she had also joined something, and she still remembered the weight of every name on her list, and she had not forgotten any of them. Cale. I served, he said. For 15 years I served. Then I left. Then I came here. You left. I left. Truly. He was quiet. Cale. Truly I left. I do not work for the people I worked for Lyora. Not in the way you mean. The work I did. The work that taught me to move the way I move. That work is over. That career is closed. Then why? Then why what? Then why the scars? Then why the silence? Then why does my chief of intelligence tell me your records were built by hands more careful than hers? He looked at her then. He looked at her for a long moment. He said, because some doors close, but the men who walk through them do not stop being men who walk through them. That is not an answer. It is the only answer I am free to give. She wanted to be angry. She wanted to demand more. She was the empress of 17 star systems, and a man was telling her he could not give her his full truth, and she was supposed to be furious. She was not furious. She believed him. The piece of him he had just handed her. The boy of 12 in the colony square. The names on the list. The aunt who did her best. That piece was real. She could hear the realness in his voice. She had heard 1,000 lies in her long reign, and this was not one of them. He had given her a peace. He had given her a true peace. He would give her more when he could. She drew a long breath. She let it out. "All right," she said. "All right. For now, all right." He nodded. They started walking again. After a while, she said, "What was your sister's name, the one who drowned?" "Mira. Mira. She was 7. The river took her in the spring flood. I was 9. I tried to catch her. The current was too strong. I have not been near river since." "Do you dream of her?" "Sometimes." "What does she do in the dreams?" He thought about it. "She holds out her hand. She is older in the dreams. Older than she ever got to be. She is the age I am now. She holds out her hand and she says she is fine. She says she is just on the other side of something. She says I should stop trying to catch her." Leora was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I will tell you about my brother, one day, when I am ready." He nodded. He did not push. He just walked beside her in the morning light, and the wind moved through the new tomato vines, and somewhere far above them, a bird Leora could not name made a long, slow, mournful sound. The next 2 months were not what she had expected. She had expected wariness. She had expected the awkward distance of two people who had just finished a hard conversation. She had expected to lie awake at night cataloging every word he had spoken to her since the wedding and trying to decide which of them had been true. Instead, she found herself in the gardens. She found herself in the gardens at dusk. She found herself in the gardens at dusk with a man who knelt in the dirt and showed her how to tell when a tomato was ready by the way the skin yielded under a fingertip. "Press it," he said, "with my hand. With your hand. I am an empress. You are also a woman with a hand. Kale. Press the tomato, empress." She pressed the tomato. It yielded. It smelled when she lifted it to her face like dust and sun, and something so old and so simple she could not put a word to it. "Now you eat it," he said, "raw." "Raw. It is unprepared. It has not been." Leora. "What?" "Eat the tomato." She ate the tomato. She had eaten in 3,000 state dinners. She had been served by master chefs from 60 cultures. She had tasted wines that cost more than small ships. She had drunk distillations of nectar from flowers that bloomed only once a century on a moon that had since been destroyed in a war that nobody remembered. The tomato was better than all of it. She did not tell him that. She suspected from the small smile at the corner of his mouth that she did not have to. He taught her to read the soil. She taught him to read the star maps her father's father had drawn. He taught her the names of 3 earth herbs that would grow in a Larian climate if she let them have shade. She taught him the 17 prayer phrases of the southern provinces, which had not been spoken in court in 100 years, because nobody wanted to remember the old religion, and he learned them in 3 days. He never tried to kiss her. She noticed. She noticed that she noticed. She did not know what to do with the noticing. She was 200 years old. She had been married briefly when she was 40 to a man who had been chosen for her by her father and who had been a kind man and who had died in a hunting accident before their first anniversary. After that, she had ruled alone. She had never wanted another marriage. She had thought she was done with such things. She had been wrong. She had not known she had been wrong. She had not known. Until she found herself in a garden at dusk with a man who pressed a tomato into her hand and waited patient as the earth while she decided whether she would taste it. The night she told him about her brother, it was raining. It rained rarely into the capital. The summer dry was long. When the rain came, it came hard in fat, warm drops that struck the marble of the upper terraces and ran in sheets down the carved gutters and pooled in the deep stone basins of the lower courtyards. She found him under the south colonnade. He was watching the rain. He had a clay cup of tea in his hands. The steam rose past his face and disappeared into the dark. She sat down beside him. She did not say anything for a long time. He did not ask. He just held out the cup. She took it. She drank from it. She handed it back. She said his name was Avar. He waited. He was younger than me, by 40 years, which is not so much for our people. He was my mother's last child. She did not have an easy time with him. She almost did not survive his birth. I helped raise him for the first 10 years. I was 60 when he was born. I had already been preparing for the throne for 2 decades. He was my, he was my, she stopped. She could not find the word. He was your brother, Kale said. Yes. And? And there was a war. There is always a war. The Scythian conquered. We had been fighting them for, I do not remember how long. A long time. Avar was 40. He insisted on serving. I could have, as the heir. I could have ordered him kept out of the lines. I did not. He wanted to serve. He was. So angry he thought I was, holding him back. You let him go. I let him go. Leora. There was a battle at a place called the Velen Crossing. It was supposed to be a small engagement, a holding action. Avar's company was supposed to be in reserve. They were not supposed to be in the line at all. There was a failure in communication. The Scythian came in from a direction we had not defended. She stopped. The rain came harder. She made herself keep going. Avar was in the second wave. The second wave became the first wave. There was nothing left of the first wave by the time the second wave was needed. He was killed in the third hour by a thrown spear. It went through his throat. I am told he did not suffer long. You were there. I was there. I arrived 4 hours later with reinforcements. The battle was over by then. I walked the field. I was looking for him. I found him. He had been. They had been. The Scythian had. Her voice cracked. She closed her eyes. She felt his hand on hers. Not gripping, not pulling, just resting. Open palm against the back of her hand, the way a person sets a hand on the rim of a cup that someone else is holding, just to be there. She kept her eyes closed. She said, I tried to carry him back to the line by myself. One of my generals tried to stop me. He said I should not see it. I told him I had already seen it. I carried him. I made it. Half a mile, then I fell. I dropped him. The fall is how I got the scar. She touched her right cheek. She had touched the scar perhaps 4 times in 80 years. She did not like to acknowledge it. The court healers had offered to remove it. She had refused. She had not been able to say why. I cut my face open on a piece of broken armor. I did not notice until later. I picked him up again. I kept walking. I made it to the line. I gave him to my second in command. I sat down. Someone bandaged my face. I do not remember who. The rain ran off the colonnade roof in a long silver curtain. Kale's hand stayed on hers. He did not speak. He did not offer her words. He did not say he was sorry. He did not say her brother would be proud of her. He did not say time would heal. He did not say anything. He just sat there, in the rain, with his hand on her hand. And after a while, she opened her eyes and she looked at him and she said, Thank you for not saying anything. What would I say? Most people try to say something. Most people are afraid of silence. Yes. He drank from the teacup. He handed it to her. She drank. She handed it back. They sat in the rain for another hour. He did not move his hand. She did not ask him to. The next afternoon, she told him about Saren. She told him in the war room, with the door sealed, with Hallis Corps listening in the corner, with 3 trusted generals present. She told him because she had decided, because if her husband was going to be inside her walls during what was coming, she needed him to know what was coming. He has been planning this for 100 years, she said. 100 years. He warned me when I took the throne. He said the dominion would be ruined by a queen who negotiated. He said the throne belonged to a warrior. He did not move against me then because the houses were tired. The houses had just finished a succession war. They were not ready for another. And now they are ready. He has been collecting them, slowly, one house at a time, with promises, with favors, with marriages. He has cousins in 14 of the 17 systems. He has admirals in 3 of my 5 fleet commands. He has spent 100 years pulling threads. The wedding to Earth, the treaty. That was the thread he was waiting for. That was the thread that pulled the others. Why? Because he believes humanity is a disease. He has said so, publicly. He believes my marriage is the act of a queen who has surrendered to the rod of foreign blood. He has been writing speeches about it for months. We intercepted 3 of them. They are persuasive to certain kinds of men. And his fleet, 64 ships, the 3rd Border Command. He has commanded it for 30 years. The crews are personally loyal to him. Many of them have never met me. Some of them were born after I took the throne. To them, he is the empire. I am a portrait on a wall. Cale leaned over the map table. He studied it. He asked sharp questions about fleet positions, about which generals could be trusted, about the loyalty of the planetary defense forces, about supply lines, about communications routing, about which houses on the council had cousins in Saren's officer corps. He asked questions a farmer would not have known to ask. Hallis Kaur watched him from her corner and said nothing. The generals watched him and said little. He worked through this map for an hour and a half. He moved markers. He pulled threads. He showed Leora where the weak points were. He showed her things her own generals had not seen. He did it gently. He did not embarrass them. He did it the way a man teaches a child to find north by pointing at the sky and waiting for the child to find it themselves. When he was done, the senior general, a hard old soldier named Dornvesh, looked at Leora and said, "Empress." "Yes. This man is not a farmer." "I am aware, General." "Empress, if I may, whatever he is, whoever he is, I would like very much for him to stay in this room during the planning." "He is staying." "Good," said Dornvesh. He bowed to Cale, a small bow, a general's bow. The bow one professional gave another when the professionals had recognized each other across a table. Cale bowed back. Leora watched it happen and felt something she had not felt in 80 years. She felt hope. That night she went to him in his rooms, not for what the diplomats had implied during the marriage negotiations. Just to sit with him. She had never been in his rooms before. He had always come to hers. He opened the door at her knock and did not seem surprised to see her. His rooms were small, plain, 3 seed packets on the windowsill, a book on the bedside table, a folded blanket on the chair. The window was open. He had been sitting by the window, reading. She came in. She closed the door behind her. She sat down on the edge of his bed. He sat down on the chair. They did not speak for a while. Then she said, "I am going to lose." He looked up. "If it comes to a fight, with Saren, with the houses he has gathered, I am going to lose. I have known it since you mapped it out today. My generals know it too. They will not say it, but they know." Leora. "I do not have the houses. I have a treaty with Earth that has not yet been ratified. I have a fleet command that is loyal but small. I have a council that is half infected. I have an intelligence service that is exhausted. I have a husband who is. Who is?" She stopped. "Leora. I have a husband who is. More than he says. But who is one man? And one man cannot beat 64 ships in a century of preparation." He stood up. He walked to the bed. He knelt down in front of her on the floor so that his face was below hers. He took her left hand in both of his. He said, "Empress." "What?" "I am not one man." She looked at him. "I am not one man," he said again. "I am one man, with friends. 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 Whose?" "Friends I have been making, Leora, quietly, for 4 years, before I ever walked into your throne room, and other friends I have been making more recently. In your kitchens, in your guard barracks, in your library archives, old friends and new ones. Some you know, some you do not." "What are you telling me?" "I am telling you that you are not alone in this room, and you are not alone in this palace, and you are not alone in this war." She stared at him. Her hand was very warm in his hands. She did not pull it away. "How long?" she said. "How long what?" "How long have you been making friends in my palace?" "Since the first week." "Why?" "Because I was sent to protect you." "Sent." sent by Earth, by people who were once Earth, who are now something else, something that thought you were worth protecting. From what? From the day that is coming, Lyora, the day Saren brings 64 ships to your front door. We have known about this for longer than you have. She could not speak. She tried to speak. The words would not come. He held her hand in both of his and waited. She found her voice. Kale. Yes. If Saren is coming, with 64 ships, and you are, what you say you are, and your friends are, what you say they are, then what is the plan? The plan, Empress. He looked up at her. The plan is for you to live. That is not enough. It is enough for tonight. Kale, Leora, I do not want only to live. I know. I want him to lose in front of all of them, in front of every house that bent to him. I want them to see what they bent to. I want them to regret it. Yes. Lyora. He smiled. It was the first time she had seen the smile that was both farmer and not farmer, both gentle and not gentle. That is also part of the plan. She laughed. She had not laughed in a week. She did not let go of his hands. He did not let go of hers. 3 days later, the alarm woke her at the second hour past midnight. It did not wake her with a sound. It woke her with a smell. Smoke. She sat up. The room was dark. The fire in the corner had burned down to embers. She could smell it. Not the fire. Something else. Something acrid. Something that should not have been in her chambers at all. Her door opened. Kale, fully dressed, boots laced, a weapon in his right hand that she had never seen before, and that she was certain he had not brought into her palace through any door her customs officers had opened. Up, he said. Kale, up now. Get dressed. Soft shoes, dark clothes, 3 minutes. The second drawer in your wardrobe. The brown trousers, the black tunic, no jewelry. Now Lyora. She had ruled for 2 centuries. She got up. She got dressed. In 2 minutes, the second drawer, the brown trousers, the black tunic, no jewelry. When she came out of her dressing alcove, he was at the door. He was listening. His head was tilted. His weight was forward. He was breathing slow. Kale. Shh. What is happening? Saren is in your palace, Empress. He cannot be. He is 3 weeks away. We have not. He was never 3 weeks away. The fleet is in orbit. It arrived an hour ago. Half your sensor stations were compromised. Half of them did not report. The ones that did report were silenced before the signals reached the throne. He had men in your communication corps. He had a man in your gate command. He has 6 teams in your palace, Leora. They are moving toward this room. The lead team will arrive in approximately 3 minutes. How? How do I know? Because I have been listening to your security channels for 3 years on a frequency none of your people use. Because we have been waiting for this hour for longer than you can imagine. Because my friends in your kitchens noticed something tonight that did not look right, and they pulled the alarm I asked them to pull. Kale, Leora. Who let them in? He looked at her. That Empress you are about to see. He pulled her into the corridor. The lights had gone out in the upper hallway. The emergency strips along the floor were dim red. The air smelled wrong. There was no sound of guards. There were always guards, in every corridor of the Empress's wing, at every hour of the night. There were no guards. She understood in a cold, clear flash what no guards meant. The night watch had been pulled, or paid, or killed. Kale was moving. He was not running. He was moving the way a hunter moves through a forest where he has memorized every fallen branch. He held her left wrist with his right hand. His grip was light. His fingers were warm. He led her to a panel in the wall she had passed 1,000 times and never noticed. He pressed 2 points on the carved leaf pattern. A seam appeared. The seam opened. A narrow passage went down into the dark. How did you find this? Your librarian showed me. My librarian. He has been working for me for 2 years, Empress. He sends his apologies for the deception. He says the Dominion deserved better than what your cousin was planning, and he has been waiting a long time to help. Kale. In Leora. She went in. He came in behind her. The panel slid shut. The passage was narrow. The walls were rough stone. The air smelled of dust and old metal. She could hear somewhere above them the muffled sound of boots running on her marble floors. They went down, 3 levels, then a turn, then another. Then a heavy door that Cale opened with a sequence. He tapped on a wall panel that did not look like a wall panel. The door opened on a small chamber she had never seen. A surveillance node, 6 screens, live feeds from her palace. Cale touched one. The screen changed. The screen showed the eastern outer gate of the palace grounds. The gate was open. A man in noble dress was standing beside the keypad. He had just keyed the override. Lord Tessar Mael, the cousin who had laughed at Cale at the wedding feast. The cousin who had called him a farmer. The cousin who had taken pleasure in humiliating her husband in front of the assembled houses. He was standing at her eastern gate. He had keyed the override. He was beckoning the shadow guard through. She felt her hand close into a fist. She did not feel it close. She watched it close from somewhere outside her own body, the way you watch a hand belonging to someone else. Tessar. Yes? He let them in. He let them in. He has been Saren's man for at least 8 years. He has been working you for 3. Every time he insulted me at a state dinner. Every time he made you angry. He was watching to see how you handled it, to see what you would tolerate, to see how alone you were. He reported back to Saren after every event. He laughed at you. Yes. At our wedding, he laughed at you. Yes. And it made him feel safe, to laugh because he thought I was alone. He thought you were nothing. He thought I would not have anyone. That is exactly what he thought, Leora. She looked at the screen. She looked at Tessar Mael standing under the lights of her eastern gate, smiling, gesturing the killers through, laughing softly at something the lead officer of the Shadow Guard had said. She did not say anything. The screen flicked. A new feed. The corridor outside her bedchamber. 6 soldiers in Shadow Guard armor, stacking on the door, weapons up. The lead soldier kicked the door. They went in. They went into her bedroom. They cleared the bed. They cleared the dressing alcove. They cleared the inner sitting room. They moved like professionals. They were professionals. They found nothing. The lead soldier spoke into a comms unit on his collar. She heard the audio through Cale's panel. She heard the lead soldier say, "Target not present." Repeat, "Target not present." Sweeping the wing. She heard the answer somewhere on the upper command channel, a voice she had not heard in 9 years. Saren. Find her. That was all. 2 words. Find her. The voice of the cousin who had once read her stories in the summer palace when she was small. The voice of the cousin who had spent 100 years pretending to forgive her for taking the throne his father had told him should have been his. The voice that had just ordered 6 men to find her and bring her back to him in pieces. Cale touched her arm. Leora. I am all right. Are you? No. But I am functional. Move. He moved. He led her out of the surveillance node by a different passage. They went down again. They went down into corridors she had never imagined existed under her own palace. The walls were older down here, pre-imperial, lit by the faint blue glow of bioluminescent moss that someone centuries ago had cultivated to grow on these stones. She walked. He walked. She did not ask where. She trusted him to know. She did not have time to be surprised that she trusted him. They reached the comm room 4 corridors and 2 stairwells later. It was old, older than her grandmother. Built during the First Dynasty as a redundant communications backup in case of a siege of the palace. Forgotten by everyone except the keepers of the under-palace records, of which there had been only one for the last 120 years. Cale's librarian friend, apparently. The room had a single antique console, a heavy chair, a power cell that should have been dead and was not. 3 small lights on the wall that flickered to life when Cale stepped through the door. He sat down at the console. He typed. His fingers moved fast across keys she did not understand. The console came alive. A voice came through, filtered, distant, crackling. This is Ironclad. Identify. Cale spoke. He spoke clearly. His voice had changed again. The farmer was gone. The gentle man who had taught her to press a tomato was gone. The man who had held her hand in the rain was gone. In their place was someone else, a professional, a soldier giving a status report on an open emergency channel. This is Master Sergeant Cale Hadley, operating under Protocol Shadow Garden. The asset is secured. Local environment is hostile. I count 6 teams, approximately 24 hostiles in immediate area. Reinforcements unknown. We are at the secondary site. Repeat, we are at the secondary site. Requesting extraction. Requesting strike team. A pause, the voice came back. Sergeant, Strike Team Alpha is being deployed. ETA 45 minutes. Can you hold? I can hold. Sergeant, confirm asset status. Asset is unhurt and operational. Sergeant, confirm asset identity. Cale looked up at her. He held her eyes. He said asset is Empress Laura Vian of the Ilarian Dominion. Asset is. Asset is. His voice caught. His voice caught. The professional voice. The one that had been so clean and clear and far away. It caught. In his throat. On her name. He swallowed. He said, Asset is the woman I have been protecting for 2 years longer than my mission required ironclad. Asset is. Asset is my wife. Asset is alive. Asset will remain alive. Do not be late. The voice on the other end was silent for a second. Then it said, Understood, Sergeant. 45 minutes. Hold the line. Ironclad out. The console went dark. He sat for a moment. His shoulders rose. They fell. Then he stood up. He turned to her. He was the professional again. The mask was back in place. But she had seen what was under it now. She had seen it 3 times. The wedding feast, the vase. Just now. Each time the mask slipped a little further. Each time it took a little longer to come back. Leora. Cale. I am sorry for saying it like that. On an open channel, I should not have. Cale. I should have kept it formal. They will record it. There will be questions later. I should have. Cale. Yes. Master Sergeant Cale Hadley. Yes. Special Operations. Yes. Terran. Yes. Sent 4 years ago. Sent 4 years ago. To protect me. To protect you. Even before the marriage was arranged. Even before. The marriage was the cover, not the mission. The mission was always you. She looked at him. The old comm room, the dim blue moss light, the flickering wall sconces, the chair he had just risen from, the console he had just used to call down a strike team from the stars, the man standing in front of her in dark clothes with a weapon in his hand and dirt still under his nails from the garden that morning, the man who had pressed a tomato into her hand, the man who had sat in the rain with his hand on hers and said nothing while she cried, the man who had just called her his wife on a channel he knew was being recorded. She walked up to him. She put both her hands on his face. She held his face between her palms. She kissed his forehead. Once. Lightly. Like a benediction. She said, Now you tell me how we live through the next 45 minutes. He smiled. It was the smile he had given her at the wedding. The small smile. The gentle one. As if he were meeting an old friend. He said, We hold the line, Empress. Together. Above them in the palace, 23 Shadow Guard soldiers began moving toward the lower levels. The clock had started. 45 minutes. Hold the line. Part 3, the one I chose. 45 minutes. Cale moved through the comm room like a man building a wall. He pulled storage crates. He stacked them against the door. He checked the angles. He pulled a heavy table on its side and dragged it across the narrow corridor outside. He worked fast. He worked silently. He worked the way a man works when he has done this kind of work in 12 other rooms on 12 other nights and has not always lived to see the morning. Leora watched him. She watched him for 30 seconds. Then she picked up the second crate herself. He looked at her. He did not tell her to stop. He gave her a small nod, a worker's nod, one pair of hands acknowledging another. He gestured to the corner where the rest of the crates were stacked. She went. She hauled. She did not think about the fact that she was the empress of 17 star systems hauling supply crates in her own basement at 3 in the morning. She would think about it later, if there was a later. The first explosion shook dust from the ceiling. It was distant, 2 floors up. They had found the upper end of the passage. They were blowing through it. Kale checked his weapon. He checked a second weapon she had not seen him take. He pulled a third from somewhere along his back and laid it on the table beside the console. He pulled a knife from his boot and laid it next to the third weapon. He looked at her. He said, "Have you ever fired a Terran sidearm?" "No." "Then you are going to learn in about 90 seconds. He took her hand. He placed the smaller weapon in it. He showed her the grip. He showed her the safety. He showed her the sight. He showed her where to hold her thumb so the recoil would not break her wrist. He did all of this in under a minute. He did all of this without raising his voice. He said, "If anyone comes through that door who is not me, you shoot them. Kale, you shoot them, Lyora, center of the chest, 2 times, then you move. You do not stand still. Standing still is how people die. You move to that corner, you shoot again. You move to that corner, you shoot again. You do not stop moving. Kale." "Repeat it back to me." 2 shots. Center of the chest. Move. 2 shots. Move. Good. Kale. "What? I have killed before." He looked at her. "At the Velen crossing." "Yes." He nodded. He did not look surprised. He did not look pleased. He looked sad for 1 second. The sadness of a man who has just been told that the woman he loves has also walked through a door he had hoped she would never have to walk through. Then the sadness was gone, and he was the professional again. He said, "Then you know that the body remembers and the mind catches up later. We will catch up later, together. Right now we live. Right now we live." Yes. The second explosion was closer. The first soldier came through 40 seconds later. He came through the corridor, outside, not the door. He came through the side passage Kale had not had time to seal. He came in low, weapon up, scanning the room. He was good. He was fast. He cleared the angles like a man who had cleared 100 rooms. He was not as fast as Kale. Kyle was already moving when the soldier crossed the threshold. He was past the table. He was inside the soldier's weapon arc. The soldier saw him too late. The soldier got his weapon up too late. The soldier opened his mouth to call out too late. Kale's blade went in under the chin. The soldier was on the ground before the body knew it was dying. Kale was already past him. He pulled the soldier's weapon. He pulled the soldier's ammunition. He pulled the small radio off the soldier's collar. He listened to the radio for 3 seconds. He turned to her. He said, 12 more in the immediate corridor. 11 on the way down. They have orders to take you alive. They have orders to kill me. How kind of him. My cousin always was a romantic. She did not know where the laugh came from. She did not know how it found its way out of her throat. But it came. A small, dark laugh. The laugh of a woman who had decided, somewhere between the comm room and the corpse on the floor, that she was not going to die afraid. Kale looked at her. He smiled. He said, "I love you, Empress." She said, "Save it for after, Farmer." He said, "After." The next wave came through the corridor. She did not remember most of the next 20 minutes. She remembered fragments, the flash of plasma in the small room, the smell of burned air, the way Kale moved, the way he was never standing where the shot was aimed, the way he was always behind the man whose chest had just been on the wrong side of his blade. She remembered firing. She remembered the recoil hurting her wrist exactly as much as he had said it would. She remembered the first man she hit, the way he stopped, the way he looked at his own chest with surprise, the way he sat down on the floor as if he had decided on his own to sit, as if dying was a kind of resting. She remembered firing again. She remembered moving. She remembered Kale saying her name once. Sharp. Not a question. A command. She had moved without thinking. A blade had gone past her shoulder where her head had been. She had turned and fired, and a man had fallen. She remembered Kale was bleeding. He had been bleeding for a while. There was blood running down the side of his neck. There was blood on his left arm. There was blood on his ribs. He kept moving. He kept fighting. He kept being where the next shot needed him to be. She thought somewhere in the middle of it, this is what he has been. This whole time. This is who he has been. This is what he is. She thought immediately after, I'm going to keep him. The fourth wave was different. The fourth wave brought grenades. She did not see the grenade come in. She saw Kale see it. She saw his face change. She saw him cross the room in 2 steps. She felt his weight hit her shoulder. She felt herself going down. She felt his body cover hers. The grenade went off. The world became white, then black, then ringing, then his voice, close to her ear, saying her name, over and over, the way a man says the only word he can remember. Leora, 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 Leora. She opened her eyes. She said, Kale, are you hurt? No. Anywhere. Anywhere at all. Tell me where. No, Kale, no. Are you... He pushed himself off her. He did it badly. He grunted. He sat back against the wall. His left side was wrong. His shirt was wet. The wet was spreading. She sat up. She looked at him. She put her hand on his side. Her hand came away red. Kale, it is not as bad as it looks. Kale, I have had worse, Leora. You have had worse. I have. That is not a comfort. He laughed, just a small one. It pulled at his side, and the laugh became a wince, and the wince became a long, slow breath through clenched teeth. She tore the hem of her tunic. She made a pad. She pressed it against the wound. He grunted. She said, how long? How long what? How long do we have? 12 minutes. Until the strike team. Until the strike team. And how many more out there? I don't know. Some. Enough. Enough to come through that door. Yes. She looked at his face. The blood was on his cheek now, from the side of his neck. The wound there was small. The one in his side was not. She made a decision. She did not announce it. She did not discuss it. She simply made it. The way she had made decisions across her long reign. Quickly. Cleanly. Without asking permission of anyone, including herself. She picked up the second weapon. The bigger one. The one he had laid on the table. She stood up. She walked to the door. He said, Leora, what are you doing? I am holding the line. Leora. You said together, Kale, this is together. You sit, you breathe, you stop bleeding. I will hold the door. Leora. 12 minutes. You cannot hold this position with one weapon against... I do not have to hold it well. I have to hold it for 12 minutes. She turned back to him. She looked down at him. She had been a queen for 2 centuries. She had been a woman in love for 2 months. She did not know which of those women was looking at him now. She suspected it was both. She said, I held the line at the Velen crossing for 3 hours after my brother died. I held it bleeding from a face I did not yet know was open. I held it because there were people behind me who needed me to hold it. There is a person behind me now. He is mine. I will hold the line. He did not argue. He nodded. He closed his eyes. He opened them. He said, I will be up in a minute. She said, take 2. She held the door. 2 soldiers came through. She shot the first one in the chest twice the way Kale had taught her. He fell. The second one was faster. He came through low. He fired. The shot went past her hip and burned a black mark on the wall behind her. She fired back. She missed. She moved. He fired again. He missed. She moved to the corner. She fired again. She hit him in the leg. He went down on one knee. He raised his weapon. A third shot rang out from behind her. The soldier's head snapped back. She turned. Kale was up. He was on one knee. He had his weapon up. He was breathing through gritted teeth. The pad of cloth she had pressed against his side was a deeper red than it had been 5 minutes ago. He said, you are very good, for a beginner. She said, I had a good teacher. Leora. Yes. I am going to pass out in approximately 3 minutes. That is not allowed. I know. Kale Hadley, you are not allowed to pass out. I know, Leora, I'm going to try not to. She crossed the room. She knelt down beside him. She pulled his arm over her shoulder. She braced him against the wall. She pressed harder on the cloth. She said, stay awake. Tell me about your sister. Mira. Mira, tell me about Mira. Anything. Just words. Just talk to me, Kale. She used to sing. When she was washing dishes, she had a song, her own song. She made it up. She would not sing it if anyone asked, only when she was alone, with her hands in the water. What were the words? There were no words. She just hummed the same 3 notes over and over. He hummed them, 3 notes, quiet, through bloody teeth, in a basement under a palace that was being assaulted by a fleet that wanted them both dead. 3 notes hummed by a man bleeding out who had never had time to grieve a sister who had died when he was 9 years old. She did not cry. She did not have time to cry. She memorized the 3 notes instead, so that someone in this universe besides Cale Hadley would know them. So that if she memorized them, she said, she is in you, Cale. She is still in you. The notes, they are in you. He nodded. He closed his eyes. She shook him. He opened them. She said, stay. He said, yes, Empress. The strike team arrived at minute 43. She heard them before she saw them. She heard the booms, the far end of the corridor, the wall coming down, the shouts, voices in Terran Standard, commands she did not understand but recognized in shape, the way soldiers shout when they have just broken into a room they have been told to clear. Then she heard the boots. Then she heard a woman's voice. Close. Sarge. Cale opened his eyes. He said quietly, Captain Whitlock. The voice said, Sarge, where the hell are you? He raised his voice. Not by much. He did not have much to raise. Rene, in here. Footsteps, fast. Then a tall woman in dark armor came through the door weapon, up scanning. She saw Cale. She saw the blood. She saw the Empress kneeling beside him with a Terran sidearm in her hand and a pad of bloody cloth pressed to his ribs. The woman lowered her weapon. She said, you absolute son of a Rene. Stubborn, stupid, can't call for help when you need it. Rene? What? Empress Leora, may I present. Captain Rene Whitlock of the Terran Marine Corps, my oldest friend, and the only person in the galaxy who is allowed to talk to me that way. Leora looked up at the captain. Captain Whitlock was tall, 40, brown skin, black hair cut short, a scar on her chin, eyes that had just done the math on Cale's wound and decided he had 6 minutes. Whitlock said, Empress. Leora said, Captain. Whitlock said, he is going to live. Leora said, promise me. Whitlock said, ma'am, I have been making him live for 15 years. He is going to live. 2 corpsmen came in, then 4 more Marines. They lifted Cale onto a stretcher. He held Leora's hand the whole way out. He did not let go. She did not let go. They went up and up, through corridors she had walked across 2 centuries, and which now looked different because she had walked them tonight with a weapon in her hand. They came out into the upper gardens. The sun was just rising. A Terran transport sat on her ceremonial parade ground with its engines hot. Marines secured the perimeter. The palace beyond was burning in 2 places. The orbital fleet of her cousin was being engaged by 3 Terran battleships in low-orbit ships that should not have been their ships, that had been moving toward the system for weeks because Cale's friends had known what was coming. Cale was loaded onto the transport. Leora stayed beside him. She held his hand. He looked at her. He said, tomatoes. She said, what? He said, don't forget to water the tomatoes. She said, Cale Hadley, you are going to water them yourself. He closed his eyes. He did not open them again for 9 hours. The medics worked on him in orbit on the battleship Ironclad, which she boarded for the first time 3 hours after the rescue. She would not leave him. She refused. She sat outside the med bay on a hard Terran chair that was too small for her, and she did not move. And the Marines who passed her brought her water and a blanket, and finally a meal she did not eat. Captain Whitlock came and sat beside her after the 2nd hour. The captain said, he's going to be fine, Empress. They are putting him back together. They are good at it. We have. Practice. Leora said, how long have you known him? 16 years. How? Basic training. He was the kid from Kepler with the dead parents and the list of names. I was the kid from Mars Colony with the dead brother and the bad attitude. We got assigned to the same squad. He saved my life the third week. I saved his the fourth. We have been saving each other since. He told me he was no longer working for the people he used to work for. He's not Empress, not in the way you mean. He left active service 4 years ago, officially. He took this assignment as an independent, a contractor, through a back channel, with people who wanted you to live. He has not been a serving Terran soldier in 4 years. Then how? Then how am I here? Why is Strike Team Alpha here? Why was the Ironclad in your orbit? Yes. Whitlock looked at her. The captain said, because he sent me a letter, ma'am, 2 years ago. A letter. By an old-fashioned encrypted private channel, outside any official network. He told me what he had figured out. About your cousin. About the houses Saren was pulling together. About what was coming. He told me when it might come. He told me he would not be able to call for help when it came, because he might not be near a real channel, and the only signal he would be able to send was a code phrase on an old emergency line. He told me to listen for it. He told me to come if I heard it. Lyora was quiet. The captain said, he has been calling that line every 6 months for 4 years, just to make sure it still worked, just to make sure someone still answered. Every 6 months he checked, and every 6 months I answered. Lyora said, you and how many others? Whitlock said 300 the first ring, Marines who served with him, or who served with me, or who served with someone who served with him. 300 of us, volunteered, off the books, held in readiness, for a phone call that might come or might not. For 4 years. For 4 years. For a man Empress, the best one any of us ever met. We were not going to let him die alone out here, not for any throne in any galaxy. Lyora put her face in her hands. She did not cry. She sat for a long moment with her face in her hands. Then she said, thank you, Captain Whitlock. Whitlock said, he chose well, ma'am. He didn't say it. He never does. But I have known him for 16 years. He chose well. Lyora lifted her face from her hands. She said, yes, he did. Kale woke at the 9th hour. He woke slowly, the way a man wakes when his body has been told to stay asleep and his mind has refused. He opened his eyes. The ceiling was Terran metal. He turned his head. Lyora was sitting beside the bed. He said, hi. She said, hi. He said, did we win? She said, we won. He said, Tessar. She said, captured, alive, disarmed, in a cell on the 3rd deck. He has been crying for an hour. He keeps asking to see me. He said, Saren. She said, surrendered. His flagship was holed in the engines by your Ironclad 2 hours into the fight. The other ships of the 3rd Border Command refused to fire on Ilarian ground forces. They had thought they were coming home to a parade, Kale. Saren had told them. They thought there would be a parade. When they realized they had been brought to murder me, they put their weapons down, most of them. The ones that did not were destroyed. Casualties. Among my forces, 14 guards, 2 of the kitchen staff. They were trying to evacuate the children of the lower wing. They did not make it. The chef, Voron's grandson. He died trying to push a cart of children through a side door that was already blocked. He closed his eyes. He said, Lyora. She said, I know. He said, I should have known about the kitchen door. I should have. She said, you did know, Kale, you did know. You sent his cousin to the cellar with the rest of the children. The cousin is alive. The chef chose to go back for one more cart. He chose. You did everything you could. Lyora. I will mourn them with you. Later. When you can stand. I will mourn them with you. For now you breathe, and you let your captain feed you, and you do not try to get up. He breathed. He let her hold his hand. He did not try to get up. They moved her to the council chamber 4 days later. She had insisted on it. She had insisted on the public session. She had insisted on the protocols. She had insisted on the full robes and the full attendance and the full witnesses. She had insisted that Kale be there. He was not yet strong enough to stand for long periods. They had a chair brought in for him, beside her throne, lower than the throne, but on the dais, where every house in the 17 systems could see him. He was still pale. His left side was wrapped under his diplomatic tunic. He moved carefully, but he sat in the chair, beside her throne, as her husband. The chamber was full. Every house, every council seat, every governor of every world that had been called in, every general she could trust, and several she could not. The hall could hold 5,000, and tonight there were 6,000 pressed in along the walls. There were bodies in the doorways. There were faces on every balcony. They were silent. They had been silent since she walked in. They had been silent since she sat down. They had not been this silent in 100 years. The doors at the far end opened. 2 Terran Marines and 4 Ilarian guards walked in. Between them, in chains, were 2 men, High Admiral Saren Vale, Lord Tessar Mael. They were not dressed for court. They were in the plain gray tunics of prisoners. Their hair was uncombed. Their faces had not been shaved in 4 days. Saren's beard, the careful gray-streaked beard he had cultivated for distinction, looked dirty now. Looked like the beard of an old man who had stopped caring. Tessar's hands were shaking. They were walked to the center of the chamber. They were stopped 15 paces from the dais. They were not made to kneel. Leora had said no to the kneeling. She had been very specific. She had said, "They will stand. I want every man in this room to see them stand and be small." They stood. They were small. She let the silence hold. She let it hold for a long time. She watched the chamber. She watched every face. She watched the houses that had bent to Saren, the cousins, the governors, the generals who had received his private letters. She watched them all. She let them feel her eyes. She let them feel the silence. Then she stood. The whole chamber stood when she stood. She raised one hand. The whole chamber sat, except for the 2 men in chains. Who could not? She spoke. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. The acoustics of the council chamber had been designed by her great-grandmother specifically so that an empress would never need to raise her voice. She said, "You all watched him walk into this room nearly 6 months ago." She did not point. They knew who she meant. She said, "You watched him walk down that aisle with his plain face and his plain hair and his plain clothes, and you laughed. Some of you out loud, some of you behind your hands, all of you laughed." She paused. She let it land. She said, "I laughed too." The chamber made a soft sound, a collective exhalation. The Empress had admitted she had laughed at her own husband. They had not expected it. They did not know what to do with it. She said, "I was wrong." She said, "It is the largest mistake I have made in a very long reign." She said, "I looked at a man and I saw nothing, because he was small and quiet and gentle, and I had been taught by the long tradition of this house that power is loud, power is large, power has medals on its chest, power speaks in declarations. Power, I was told, looks like something." She turned her head. She looked at Kale. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned back. She said, "Power looks like nothing. Sometimes. Power, sometimes, looks like a man who would rather kneel in your garden and grow you a tomato than tell you his name." She let that land. She said, "My cousin saw what you saw. My cousin saw a small human. And my cousin thought, this is the moment. She is alone. She is unprotected. She has married a weakling. The throne is within reach." My cousin moved, and my cousin failed. And my cousin failed because the man in my garden was something other than what we had decided he was. She looked at Saren. She said, "Cousin." Saren raised his eyes. She said, "You are not going to die today." Tessar made a sound, a small one, relief or terror. She could not tell. She did not care. She said, "I was going to have you killed. For 2 days. I thought about it. I imagined it. I wrote a list of methods. My generals encouraged me. Half my council demanded it. Even my husband, who knows more about killing than anyone in this room, did not argue against it." She said, "I have decided against." She said, "Not because you do not deserve it. You deserve it. 14 of my guards are dead. 2 of my kitchen staff are dead. A boy who was cooking soup 3 weeks ago died trying to get 4-year-olds out of a side door you opened. He deserves justice. Every one of them does." She said, "But I am not going to give you the dignity of dying for your cause. I am not going to make a martyr of a man who tried to murder me in my own bedroom in the dark." She said, "You are going to live. You are going to live a long time. You are going to live on the frozen ice fields of Korvath in the exile station that supplies the outer mines. You will live as a worker. You will live without your title. You will live without your name. You will be known by a number. You will dig. You will not be permitted to speak to any of the other prisoners. You will be permitted once a year to send a letter to anyone you choose. The letters will be read. The letters will be archived. The galaxy will know how the great Saren Vale, who once told his cousin that the throne belonged to a warrior, spent the last 100 years of his life." She paused. She said, "I am taking from you the only thing you ever wanted, which was to be remembered as large." Saren's face did not move, but something in his eyes broke, just a little, just enough that she could see it. She turned her gaze on Tessar. Tessar was already crying. She said, "Cousin Tessar." He said, "Mercy, cousin, mercy, I." She said, "Be silent." He was silent. She said, "You laughed at my husband in this very chamber nearly 6 months ago. I have watched the recording 4 times. You laughed, and you bowed, and you went to your seat, and you congratulated yourself for putting the small man in his place." She said, "You will join your master on the ice. You will work beside him. You will not be permitted to speak to him. You will see him every day across a frozen plain, and you will remember that you bet your life on a man who is now a number with a shovel." She said, "Take them out." The Marines and the guards took them out. The chamber watched them go. The chamber did not speak. Leora let the silence settle. Then she did something she had not planned. She turned. She walked down the 3 steps of the dais. She walked across the marble floor in front of the throne. She walked to Kale's chair. She stopped in front of him. She held out her hand. He looked up at her. She said, "Stand." He said, "Leora," the medic said. She said, "I know what they said. Stand, husband." He took her hand. He stood, slowly, with pain. He stood beside her. 6,000 witnesses watched him do it. She turned them both to face the chamber. She kept his hand in hers. She raised their joined hands. She said, "This is my husband." She said, "Not because Earth sent him, not because a treaty required him, not because diplomats arranged it." She said, "Because when I had a choice to turn from him or to keep him, I chose to keep him." She said, "I choose him in front of all of you. I choose him as my equal. I choose him as my partner. I choose him as the man whose name will sit beside mine on every document this throne issues for as long as I sit on it. I choose him because he chose me. First, for 4 years, before I knew he existed." She said, "Anyone in this chamber who has a problem with my choice?" She looked across the houses. She let her eyes move across every face. She said, "May, step forward, now." Nobody stepped forward. She said, "Then it is done." She turned to Kale. She did not kiss him in front of 6,000 witnesses. That was not her way. That was not his way. She lifted his hand to her lips. She kissed the back of it. Once, lightly, like a benediction. She walked him back to his chair. She helped him sit. She returned to her throne. She closed the session. The houses bowed, the chamber emptied. The gardens were quiet that evening. The summer wind had come. It moved through the tomato vines in the upper bed. The light was thin and gold, the kind of light that only happened in the capital for about 20 minutes in the late summer, when the sun caught the upper atmosphere at exactly the right angle and turned every leaf the color of honey. Leora sat on the stone bench Kale had cleared 3 months ago. Kale sat beside her. He was healing. The wound in his side was closed. The wound in his shoulder was closed. He moved carefully, but he moved. He had walked here on his own. He had refused the cane the Terran medics had tried to give him. She had let him refuse. She had walked beside him slowly. She had not offered her arm. She had known he would not take it. She had walked at his pace and let him be a man walking under his own power into the garden he had made. Now they sat. The wind moved. The tomatoes were heavy and red on the vines. She said, "Will you stay?" He looked at her. He said, "I planted these tomatoes." She said, "Is that an answer?" He said, "I do not abandon the things I plant, Lyora. I never have." She looked at the garden. She looked at the tomatoes. She looked at the small green herbs from earth that he had planted in the half-shade beside the southern wall, the ones he had told her would grow if she gave them shade, the ones that had grown. She said, "There is going to be more. Trouble." He said, "I know." She said, "Saren's allies, the houses that supported him. They will not all submit. There will be small wars for a generation, perhaps two." He said, "I know." She said, "And humanity has its own enemies, out beyond the rim. You told me about them." He said, "I did." She said, "We will not be at peace, Kale. Not in this life, not in the long part of mine that I have left." He said, "I know." She said, "Will you stand beside me through it?" He looked at her. The sun was on his face, the thin gold late summer sun, the lines at the corners of his eyes that she had first seen in the morning light 4 months ago, the scar on his temple that was new from the third grenade, the one that had nearly taken his eye. He said, "Empress." She said, "Don't call me Empress." He said, "Leora." She said, "Yes." He said, "I have been standing beside you since the day I walked into your throne room. I will be standing beside you on the day my last day comes. Wherever that day comes, whatever it looks like, whatever I have to do to be there, I will be there." She did not speak. She did not know what to say to that. So she did what he had done for her that night in the rain when she had told him about her brother. She put her hand on his hand, open palm against the back of his hand. She did not grip, she just rested it there. He turned his hand under hers. He laced his fingers through her fingers. The wind moved through the tomato vines. The gold light held. And in the garden where a farmer had once knelt in the dirt and pressed a fruit into the hand of an empress who did not know yet that she was about to learn the most important lesson of her life, two people sat side by side and watched the sun go down on a world that had nearly lost them both and would not now lose them for a long time to come.